Welcome to the Atlantic Bridge podcast, politics viewed from both sides of the pond. My name is Stefan Sasse, and with me is my co-host Emmett Booth.
There is a bit of conventional wisdom in the United States punditry and also in Europe that if you want to know who won a specific debate, what you need to do is to tune off the audio completely so you don't hear anything and just watch the body language of the candidates. And that's the way you can tell if someone won. So, for example, you had the 1992 debate in which George Herbert Walker Bush looked at his watch in a really bored way. Or if you look at the Bush versus Kerry debate in which Bush had this calm, I got this demeanor and all that kind of stuff. Or the Obama-Romney debates, which were more or less equal in that regard. But I think if you try to use this particular bit of knowledge in the current debates, it doesn't get you quite as far as you might be used to. And today we want to talk a little bit about how the debates work within the context of a presidential campaign, how they have worked in the past, how they work this time, and how they might work in the future. So I want to essentially kick this off by the most important question that everyone keeps asking about these debates, which is, are they really important? You know, do they really swing an election? Like, this is the moment when candidate A lost and candidate B really dominated the whole proceedings from there on out? Or are the debates basically an exercise in futility, which you just are not allowed to bungle?
There's strong arguments both directions. I like that not to bungle thing. I definitely think there's a certain case to be made that the debates are all about reaching a floor, about performing just well enough, and if both candidates do that, there's a limit on how much of an impact it has, and that so it only affects you if you really completely melt down. But for me, I think debates, they push the reactions to. I'm interested in seeing the candidates reacting to them. Like, I'm always interested in seeing what the candidates do a few days after the debate. I mean, during the first Obama-Romney debate, that definitely did seem to move the polls to a somewhat significant degree when Romney won that first debate. And again, it seemed largely because he reached this floor of plausibility, whereas there's both Obama and his Republican opponents have been casting him as a heartless vulture capitalist, and he didn't come off that way. So that he reached a level of suitability that he didn't maybe have before, and that certainly changed the polls. But then you see that the Obama campaign really kicking into high gear in reaction to that first debate, realizing they'd been kind of taking the election for granted. So ultimately, Obama won the election by about the same margin you'd predict right before that first debate. So, you can say it evens out to not much of an impact, but that you have to look at the kind of ups and downs of that process. And I think that performs a nice test for the campaign that the Obama campaign managed to kick back into high gear after that first debate was a strong sign for him and his team as a whole. And in this case, I think you're seeing Trump dig himself deeper in the wake of these debates, where he had that back and forth with Hillary over the Miss Universe contestant in the first debate, and his response to that was to go on a negative tweet storm about her and her weight and etc. for over the next couple of days. Whether or not that alone has an impact on the polls, I'm not sure, but it definitely represents a missed opportunity for him. So I guess, a lot of the debates, it's a question of what would happen if this debate didn't occur at all would be more noticeable for a difference to take place there? Or, again, does it even out when you see what the campaigns do in reaction? So, long and short of it, I think it's going to be difficult to exactly quantify the impact of a debate, but they spur the campaigns in reaction to them, and that might have an impact on the polls. I think they obviously serve as a flashpoint for people to get a look at the candidates, but I doubt they swing elections for the most part.
I mean, they are also pretty much clogged by a lot of folklore. I mean, the Nixon-Kennedy debate, or Reagan's with his "there you go again," or all these kind of stories, they tend to become so much greater in retrospect, which makes it really hard to discern the real impact those debates had. And I guess the Obama-Romney debates are one of the few cases in which we can be pretty clear that they didn't change much, that they didn't have that big of an impact. But if you go back only one election, you have the Obama-McCain debates, which are pretty unremarkable, I guess. I don't remember anything about them. But what you have is the Biden-Palin debate. And this one is one of those that is important in terms of you are not allowed to bungle it. Because Palin could have easily gone down the way that Trump did go down in the two current debates. And in this case, I guess 2008 might have been an even larger problem for Republicans and for the whole Tea Party movement later on. They would have lost one of the banner bearers because she made herself impossible on TV, which she didn't in the event. So I guess the opportunity cost that those debates are carrying, what you have to avoid, is almost as important as doing something right. And this seems to be a little bit of an underserved aspect about them, which will become much more pronounced with Trump's performance, I guess. So in 2020, I guess much of the talk will be like, will they avoid pulling a Trump? Call it back then. You are not allowed to fuck this up. You are allowed to be uninspiring and boring. You are allowed to interrupt your opponent. You are allowed to lie. But there is a certain threshold that you cannot cross.
Certainly. I mean, there's, again, like you say, there's mythology cloaking it, but there's that moment in the 76 Ford-Carter debate when Ford insisted that, that the Soviet Union wasn't occupying Eastern Europe. So that kind of thing, yeah, if you fail to meet a certain level of plausibility. And with any gaffe, it hits home harder if it plays into a narrative that already exists, if it feeds into what people already think about you. And with Trump lately, that's certainly been the case in these debates, that the impression people have of him as a bore and as unfit for the office temperamentally has certainly come through in those debates. So, yeah, I don't know if it's... but again, does that make fewer people vote for Donald Trump? Does that make people who were thinking about voting for him not vote for him? Or does it just prevent him from breaking out of that narrative and that assumption? So in the way that, again, a lot of debates seem like missed opportunities to me, and it's because of that, it's difficult to tell what would have happened, in a counterfactual where Trump had downplayed those narratives. But yeah, I guess so. Debates, they have this potential, this tantalizing potential of speaking to a massive audience and breaking through the media, breaking through narratives about you. But the risk is so strong that I think a lot of candidates, like you say, just fall back on being boring and just being very, small c conservative in their approach, because the risk of meltdown, I guess, is greater than the reward of really almost any reward you can gain from debate. So I think that leads to a lot of candidates playing it safe for the most part. And that probably doesn't much change the status quo of a race. But there's also the expectations game to consider, which definitely plays a large role in all these. Like Biden-Palin, you mentioned that Palin was going in with the expectations that she just basically had to stand upright in complete sentences, and that was going to be considered a win. And Biden had to go with the assumption that he couldn't act that way. Basically, that he couldn't act like it was amazing for her even to do that. Like he couldn't be Gore during the Bush debates where he was scoffing and sighing in the background. So, but again, that comes into this thing where okay, so if you meet those expectations, does that mean nothing changes, or does that mean that the public is impressed by you, or does that mean that the status quo just carries on? It's difficult, and you can quantify to a certain extent with the polls taken in the immediate wake of the debate, but at this stage of a presidential election, there's just so many factors flying around at all times that it's somewhat difficult to separate that out and just say, okay, this is because of the debate versus anything else going on in the media or in the election itself. So it's so many kind of factors go into the debate that I think it's difficult to parse out coming out of it which ones were really important and if they have a massive impact on the race at all.
It seems to me like the expectation game is kind of overrated because, yes, of course, the basic dynamic is there in the coverage of it also. If you are like Palin or Trump in this particular debate and nothing much is expected of you, I'm not quite sure whether this was the case with George W. Bush as well. But you might tell me, I didn't watch the stuff back then, but I could imagine it was. So you have this sometimes incredibly low ball, like you said, standing upright, basically, or in Trump's case, not combust spontaneously into flame or take a crap on the stage or what have you.
Exactly.
Right? So, but in terms of the expectation game, I mean, Trump basically won both of them. If you look at the commentary that came out right after the first debate, many were like, oh, Trump was unexpectedly strong. And you had the same thing now that the second debate is over. Like, he definitely exceeded expectations. And I went to work today, and some colleagues who are at least tangibly interested in the stuff, they were also going like, hey, I read the news. Trump was better than expected. And I was like, yes, he's a student that's usually an F, and now he's like an E- or whatever. So yes, of course he has improved, but it is nowhere near good. So this expectation game, it plays a large and nearly outsized role in the immediate aftermath, but in both cases now it was immediately overtaken by the professional spin. And what is also remarkable to me about the Trump-Clinton campaign is how the spin works. I mean, usually another piece of conventional wisdom is that you can't really predict whatever will interest the voters. For example, Gore's sighing wasn't even seen as a problem by pundits. It came up days later and suddenly became this huge thing. And so it is really difficult to accurately foresee which of the parts of the debate will become important or interesting. But in all those three debates that we have seen now, the two with Trump and the one with Pence, the Clinton team knew exactly what it was going for, spun it afterwards, and it worked like an A. So is Trump's campaign simply too inept, or has something fundamentally changed in how the media reacts to the campaigns?
That's an interesting question. Trump organizationally and logistically obviously is, considerably below Team Clinton. His team is decent at spinning, I think, but the problem is they've just got terrible material to spin with. When you have like Sean Hannity telling that line about what King David had 500 concubines and something, that was glorious. But yeah, so from the pollsters and political scientists I trust most, tend to say that debates can have an impact on the polls, but it's not a lasting one. That a few weeks out, a couple weeks out, that starts to dissipate. So which makes me think that the lasting impact is how the candidates react, is the spin and how successful it is, which is an adequate organizational test for office, I suppose, but. Yeah, I guess the debate itself is more just kind of a spark or a spur, an object to react to, more than the important thing in and of itself. Unless you have a instant classic gaffe moment of some kind, but who knows, again, how really influential those are. So, yeah, I think you're right that a lot of it really comes down to the post-debate skill of spinning among the teams. And I think we've definitely seen the Clintons do better at that than Trump. Because, again, after that first debate regarding the Miss Universe contestant, all Trump had to do was say, it was a long time ago, I said some disrespectful things, I apologize for it, I'm not that man, let's move on. It would be a lie, obviously, but that's easy. And then you're mostly done with it. I mean, the Clinton campaign will keep bringing it up, but there's no reason to feed that fire, and Trump keeps doing it because he can't help himself or because he knows that not backing down is the core of his appeal. So for me, I would think that would end up mattering more than the actual debate itself. Is Trump's terrible reaction to it, because that keeps the narrative going, and that ensures that it doesn't die off in a few days, doesn't dissipate as it otherwise might. So, yeah, it's more like, yeah, the debate itself is a test for the candidates, and then the reaction to the debate, I guess, is a test for the campaign and the overall strategy in the team. And I think that might have more of an effect, or determines how strong an effect the debate's going to have anyway.
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn between the two conflicting narratives about this. On the one hand, like, Trump is just uniquely bad and he keeps feeding the flames on the one hand, and on the other hand, like, this is now the first moment that we really see the superior Clinton ground game and campaign organization and simply their strategic jobs come into play. And of course, it could also be a combination of the two. But I feel like one of those two has to take center stage. Like, one of the two is more influential as an explanation than the other. And we will likely never get a second case in which to test it, because I doubt that any candidate will go in as unprepared as Trump ever again. I can't imagine that even if the GOP nominates another white supremacist in 2020, it will be one who can trouble himself with a little bit of debate prep. So this makes these debates certainly unique in a way, but it also worked on Mike Pence. And I guess Mike Pence was much more prepared than Trump. I mean, that guy isn't stupid. He's repugnant, but he isn't stupid. So he had a clear plan, which was trying to muddle the waters around what Trump really said, and to present this gentler kind of white supremacism, as Jamel Bouie is always putting it. And he succeeded in that initially. But again, the spin overtook him in less than 24 hours. Which is kind of remarkable. And for the media to go along with this, to share those Clinton campaign ads and to reinforce the narrative that, yes, the Trump campaign, and not only Trump, but also his surrogates, are lying through their teeth, that takes the active collaboration of the media. And for a very long time, they withheld this cooperation. So it seems to me that this is an influential factor here.
Certainly. I think, it definitely seemed to be the changing point for the media in terms of how they talked about Trump, and dishonesty seemed to be his recanting of birtherism, because that whole scene in his hotel, where it was just mostly just an ad for the hotel, and then he acted like Hillary was the one who started it, and then that he had ended it. That seemed to be just beyond the pale for a lot of news outlets or a lot of individual journalists, and there definitely seems to have been a palpable change in the coverage of him since. But you're right, and that definitely came home from Mike Pence after the debate. And Mike Pence was trying to do the classic thing you do, especially as a Republican in those debates. The compassionate conservative model that George W. Bush launched is really influential on the right in terms of PR and in terms of how you present yourself to people who are not Republicans. And Pence definitely was trying to capitalize on that. And it's an interesting thing, like, he can just outright lie and not seize on anything, because unlike Trump, Pence's ego wasn't on the line in that debate. Like, he didn't feel the need to dominate or really prove himself. He just had a job to do and was setting out to do it, and that job was, lying relentlessly. And I think he could have gotten away with that if he was lying about, Mitt Romney or John McCain, but he was lying about someone who the press was finally turning on in this way, and was so flagrant and over the top and flamboyant in his own lying that even Mike Pence, who's like you say, a smart guy and a talented guy and had a well-established job to play, couldn't quite pull it off, because he's playing with fire when it comes to someone like Donald Trump. And so that's where you get, people saying that Trump poisons everything that touches him. And so that is definitely somewhere where Trump does change the game, I think, a little bit in debates, that he's just a difficult ally. He's hard to surrogate for, as we see with Rudy Giuliani getting his ass handed to him by Chuck Todd the other day, which was great. And he's difficult to be on the ticket with. He makes it difficult for smart people to be smart. in a way that's definitely similar to Sarah Palin. So I think that is definitely something that is different this time around, and probably, like you say, won't be repeated in the future. But yeah.
I mean, this whole Mike Pence thing. While we're at it, it isn't about the debate specifically, but it is something that annoys me a little bit, because Mike Pence is such a radical in his own right, and it is not like he is the Republican savior. I mean, he became Trump's running mate mostly because he wasn't sure he would stand a chance for re-election in Indiana, of all places.
Yep.
So this is not Paul Ryan reborn or anything. So Mike Pence is really a second-class Republican, and even he, in comparison to Trump, looks like a second Reagan in the making. You know, like this shows you just how a unique figure Trump is. Everyone else, in comparison to him, is just infinitely better, especially for Republicans. You can see this in today's editorial from the from the Wall Street Journal, when they are suggesting that after a Trump victory, Trump could resign on Inauguration Day and make way for Pence and whatever. And you think about, guys, have you smoked the supply side ganja or whatever? Because really, on the one hand, never ever will this happen.
No.
The second hand, Mike Pence is not a paragon of sanity and middle course or anything. You know, it's not like you can draw a line, and on the left is Hillary Clinton, on the right is Trump, and in the middle is
no.
anything.
Certainly not.
It doesn't work that way. But okay, end of Pence rant. I guess we will talk about the right in America and where they are going after the election.
Sure.
But we should take a moment to talk about Tim Kaine, because this is also a really interesting thing. I mean, many people ask themselves, why did Hillary Clinton choose this guy? You know, he is white, he's a man, he's in his 50s. Okay, he's from Virginia, but still, why did you choose him? He is essentially your boring uncle who tells you about his job, which is absolutely non-interesting. He is not someone to inspire. Why didn't she choose Warren? And then you look at the vice presidential debate, and you see why she didn't choose Warren, for example. Because Elizabeth Warren is great in her own right, but she would have totally unable to do this job that Clinton sent Tim Kaine in. You know, she certainly has a feeling for what people she needs to execute a strategy. Whether that strategy is clever or not is beside the point in this moment. But she clearly knows what she needs in a surrogate, and she has it in Tim Kaine, while Trump doesn't have what he wanted in Mike Pence.
Yeah, agreed. I think Kaine works just fine as a Clinton surrogate. Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have been my first choice for Veep. I liked Tom Perez a lot, Secretary of Labor. But, Kaine is a strong, smart guy, knows policy, and like you said, I think he works really well as an attack dog for Clinton and as a surrogate, and so specifically an anti-Trump weapon. Yeah, so I thought he performed just fine, and will perform just fine as America's stepdad for the next 8 years, I always picture him like as the guy who would give you a beer just because, if you're gonna drink, I want you to drink here where it's safe, where we can keep an eye on you. Like that's that's Tim Kaine, which is perfectly fine. I have zero objections to this, but
I'm just still impressed by the fact that you. I mean, at one point she must have told him, like, this is my game plan for how we are going to beat Trump in the final, 45 days of the election. And this plan involves you going into the only high-stakes, great exposure situation that you will ever get in the next 4 years, and totally take one for the team, everyone will say you fucked it up and you were bad and you need to do it because you are serving a larger goal. And you need a person who will do that. And Tim Kaine was that guy, and who would theoretically still be able to become president. These aren't exactly qualities that oftentimes come together. So this is something, again, that is impressive in its own right, because you don't often see these qualities together, whatever you might think of them.
I completely agree. Really well said. That is exactly. I'm sure she had a conversation, something along those lines, with Tim Kaine, and he was up for it. And that shows you how she works as a manager, that she could get someone willing to do that for and do a good job of it, compared to Trump and the humiliation he's put Chris Christie through ever since Christie joined his team. You know, comments about the Oreos and sending him to get a sandwich and then teasing him about the VP slap before giving it to Pence. I mean, that's like Trump, you know, he's got, again, that compulsive need to dominate thing, which comes out in the debate strongly. And, you know, maybe Hillary's got some of that to a certain extent, but I think she really manages to keep a team together and know who's playing what role and, like you say, keep that larger goal in mind, and that's just not something Trump can do. And that's definitely something that can come out in the debates, is that temperament issue. And it's certainly come to the forefront for both the VP debate and the presidential debates.
I mean, this is a bit that you hear a lot about Hillary Clinton, you know, as a personality, that she inspires a fierce loyalty in her closest supporters.
Yep.
And I guess that worked with Tim Kaine too. I mean, I can't imagine. I could easily imagine that Clinton is also very loyal to her own people. I mean, how often has she been now attacked with this whole Blumenthal thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard her never once utter a bad word about him or anything. It's not like she comes out to his defense, but I mean, this is an obscure guy. He is not even in her employ. She could throw him under the bus, but she doesn't. And I don't remember any instance in which she would have. So
yeah, as far as I know. I mean, Team Clinton, they just went through such hell in the 90s. I gotta imagine that was a crucible that kind of forged some really tight bonds among all of them. But yeah, I've heard that too, that, you know, Hillary has this inner circle of people who really love her and have that classic thing, like, oh, if only the public saw the Hillary Clinton I know, which, you know, is what people close to Mitt Romney said as well, that, like, you know, he might come off as stiff or awkward in a large public setting, but in an intimate one-to-one setting, he was a really great guy. Which, you know, I think that's a common thing for, you know, non-extrovert politicians, that they perform better, you know, one-on-one or in close circles than in front of a large crowd. And I think it seems to definitely be the case for Hillary.
I mean, I definitely see this with Mitt Romney. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I watched this Netflix documentary, Mitt.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know if you've seen it.
I have.
And, I mean, back in 2012, I always thought, when I was watching comparisons between Obama and Mitt Romney, I guess Mitt Romney is the much nicer guy in a casual atmosphere. You know, if you think about who do you want to be related to, in terms of he's taking you out to do some things, or at a Christmas dinner or whatever, I think Obama can be very distant, can be cold, can be difficult to deal with, while Mitt Romney is, I think, everyone's favorite grandpa. I really think, on a personal level, he is a sympathetic guy, really. I mean, I cannot work with his whole religious thing that he has going on, and of course I deeply disagree on policies, but I don't. I always liked something about him, and watching this documentary, I could definitely see why people liked him and wanted him to win and all that kind of stuff. You know, the Mitt Romney, I know he needs to be president, and I can totally understand this. But at the same time, it is definitely a flaw in a politician, be it Hillary Clinton or Mitt Romney, when you have constantly to say, yeah, in reality, they are much better than you think, and yeah, this may all be true, but I simply don't see it.
Yeah, I mean,
the same is true for Hillary Clinton. I mean, if I have to watch obscure behind-the-scenes videos to get a sense of the candidate, then the candidate is doing something wrong. You know.
I absolutely agree. It's part of the job. It's not just like that PR is a thin veneer over the real job. No, it's part of the job. If you're a national politician, it's something you should be good at, because you have to communicate your ideas and the themes of your campaign and why you're running against this particular person to a large audience. And if you're not great at that, then that's definitely a mark against you as a politician. And yeah, Hillary's not great at that, and really never has been. And neither is Mitt Romney. But I agree, Mitt Romney always seemed like a likable person. He always seemed kind of, his old-fashionedness always seemed kind of adorable to me. Like, he just seemed kind of bewildered by the world of the 21st century in a way that was kind of charming. And you know, Trump is making him look so good by comparison, especially since Romney was never on board the Trump train. So yeah, there is that kind of whole.
I don't want to whitewash Romney.
No, of course,
he did
terrible
a lot
policy.
Of things, in the campaign with his own dog whistles, and I'm a severe conservative, and self-deportation, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But I can see that he, as a private person, if you know him as a private person, which is kind of unlikely because he's a multi-millionaire.
This is true.
But if you do, I guess he is really a swell guy.
Yeah,
But what gives? I don't elect a grandpa. I elect a president. So
this is true.
I don't care about this stuff. And if Obama privately was an asshole, that's a problem for the persons he knows privately. But as long as he's a good president, I don't care about this stuff. And the same is true about Hillary Clinton, or Bill for that matter.
Indeed. So we've covered some good work in the VP debate on Trump. How do you think Hillary did in the two debates we've had so far?
She did what she needed to do. She answered questions. She displayed what everyone knows she does, her deep level of penetration of the subjects, her preparation, everything. I think she gave basically a resume and showed people what she was like, what her strengths are, and she did that very well. But it doesn't matter all that much because Trump is sucking up all the oxygen in the room. So I don't think Hillary had really to do much of anything other than avoid bungling it.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Again, she just hit that floor of plausibility, which she already pretty much had, and just come off as a much more even temperament and stronger-willed person than Trump, and I think she did that certainly effectively. I liked a lot of what she said about healthcare in this last debate. I thought that was really good, and I definitely think she brought it to Trump right at the beginning in terms of all his comments about, saying that this is not just an isolated incident. You can't write this off as just, one instance of bragging to this one guy. This is a pattern in your whole life and your whole career, and that makes it unacceptable. I thought that was very well laid out. And yeah, I think it's, like we're talking about the role of the debates. It's difficult to say whether it's an effective audition for the presidency, but I think the best you can do in a debate in terms of showing what kind of president would be is show off your thought process. Is give the people an example of how you mentally work through an issue. And I think Hillary did that very effectively, and I think that's one of her strongest skills, so that certainly hit home for me. Yeah, she was never, the whole that Hillary's somewhat awkward and not very personable in large gatherings, that was never going to go away. And that, like I said, if she had tried to make that go away, I think the risk is higher than the reward, because she would probably fall flat in her face, and Linda would just look really bad. So I think playing it conservative, especially against Trump, was the right move. And yeah, I think she pulled that off. There's the thing, she needs to galvanize or excite the left, or excite a lot of the base.
She won't.
She won't, right, exactly. There's no point in her pretending otherwise. I think she needs to make a very pragmatic case to her base, or towards the more left-leaning element of the base, or recalcitrant Bernie supporters, that, here's the list of these 10 issues that I'm really going to move the ball on, whether we're talking about the Supreme Court, or healthcare, or climate change, or, this list of issues that I'm going to push on, and that really has to be the appeal, not in terms of changing the direction of the Democratic Party, or the, liberalism in general, but continue pushing the direction of the country in a more positive direction. I think that's her best case. I think she made it adequately, and I think she benefits from standing next to Trump on that stage, especially since Trump. It's so weird with Trump that his whole thing is about dominance, but he's not actually that great at going on the attack. Because I was amazed that he didn't sound populist notes in this last debate. Nothing about the Goldman Sachs speeches came up, even though I think that's overblown. I'm amazed he didn't really try to hit her with it. And he, when he complains about the moderators being on Hillary's side, that just comes off as very petty and childish. And he said at one point, you're not asking her about the emails when they had just asked her about the emails. Yeah, this thing about Trump, like his whole personality is built around being the attack dog, but his ego just gets in his way every time. Like, again, he's not... Mike Pence was trying to be effective, was trying to slip a dagger in between your ribs, and Trump can't think of any weapon except a giant cannonball. And he's just not... He's not deft, he's not clever. He can try to bulldoze you, but if that doesn't work, he has nothing to fall back on. And so that... And again, that, reflects poorly on the man in terms of how he would work as president, because there are times you have to go for nuance or for a half-loaf solution or pretending to say or think things you don't really believe. Like when Hillary, said in those, just a quick sidebar, when Hillary said in those leaked speeches, if indeed they're legit, that sometimes politicians have to have a public face and a private face. Yeah, what adult is honestly surprised to hear that from a Come on. That's true of every single politician, including Bernie Sanders, and it should be. I mean, we don't need to see and know every single detail and every single word they say. That's not... when I think of transparency, that's not really what I believe in when it comes to that. And I think if we can honestly acknowledge that there's parts of the sausage-making process that aren't going to be pretty, even when we like the law that comes out of it. I mean, she referenced, and I love it when she references, Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, which is one of my favorite movies in recent memory, specifically because it shows that, the president we revere the most, getting past some of the most, far-reaching and morally admirable legislation of our time, was making unpleasant deals with unpleasant people. And he knew it and was fine with that. And he was, lying some of the time, or putting off, just having these false strategies that he would later, double back on. It's like that's the game, and that would be the game even if Hillary never gave speeches to banks. Like, that's got nothing to do with corruption or money in politics. That's just how you work as a republic. And so I like that about Hillary, that she embraces that and can work well within it. I didn't really like Bernie for that reason, because I didn't think he could. And Trump, I think, definitely lacks... I mean, obviously, imagining Trump working on policy at all is kind of ridiculous, but he definitely lacks that ability to, know when to hold and know when to fold, as it were.
He lacks pretty much any ability that is required in a president.
Yeah, there's that.
Which is one big part of the problem.
Sure.
But, just to close this whole sausage-making thing, this is something that I thought of only yesterday. There have been attempts of trying to make some political hay of the friendship that there was between Trump and the Clintons a few years back. And I just thought, back in the primary debates, when Trump bragged about buying politicians, and he was then pressed for an example, what he offered was that he gave to Hillary Clinton, and in return, she came to his wedding. And I never thought that much about it because I really didn't care. But now, with all those speech transcripts coming out, I thought, if you think about this, you are a politician like Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump gives you, $30,000, $40,000 for your campaign, and the one thing that he wants in return is that you attend what is in effect a networking event for you.
Good point.
I would be around that sucker as well. Because he is even bad at this game. Other people, they are getting real legislation out of politicians, and he is like, I got Hillary Clinton to come to my wedding. And if you had invited her, I guess she would have come anyway, because she meets other and richer donors there. Other people, she can use her whole fucking wedding to make a whole lot of valuable connections. And this is the price you enact from her? And of course she does. And the same is true of those banks. I mean, Goldman Sachs is offering you, I don't know, what it was, $600,000, $700,000. So you hold a stump speech, basically, and cater a little bit to them. And after that, you can talk to pretty much everyone who has a say around the boss level at Goldman Sachs. That's kind of a bargain. It makes sense to take it, even if you would hate banks. It just would make sense, They pay you for something that you need anyway.
Exactly. I mean, knowing Yeah, I think it's like I was trying to make that distinction between outright corruption and just the business of politics, because I think those two often get blurred together into one thing. And I think you're right. I think there's, making connections with powerful people and being able to bring them into the room and being able to call on their resources or their expertise, that's the business of politics. And sometimes the people you're going to be calling on are, the people who do great work at, Planned Parenthood or any kind of environmental group, and sometimes those people are going to be bankers, because that's going to be relevant and you're going to need them. And I think, obviously, that can be taken too far into outright corruption. Obviously, if that can influence policy in a negative direction, there's really no denying that. But I think that distinction is an important one to make. I think a lot of people on both left and right don't make that distinction, and it's interesting to consider Trump in that regard, because, like you say, he's trying to play the game, but he's bad at it. Like he's an amateur, and he doesn't really realize, like you say, exactly the benefit he was offering Hillary with that, and that's where the whole
Stringer Bell,
exactly
The Wire season 3. That's Trump.
Well, perfect, exactly. And that, so that's where the whole "I'm not a politician" thing really falls apart. I mean, it's a stupid idea to cast that as a benefit for a candidate, regardless. But that's where it really collapses, because, then if you're not a politician, you don't know that. If Trump didn't realize what he was handling with that system. So that's why it's bad to not be a politician run for political office, because you don't know how it works. You don't know how to play it. And that, I think, also comes through in the debates, that Trump didn't do debate prep because he thought he could just wing it and that would be effective. That in the aftermath of the debate, he wasn't able to constrain his ego or anger, that he has surrogates who, like Rudy Giuliani and Sean Hannity, who say nonsense. Like, there's cost to winging it, or like the lack of ground game, which I think might be a real, that might really knock a couple points off Trump in favor of Clinton when it comes to actual election days, his utter lack of a real logistical ground game in the swing states and how much Hillary's put into it. And that all adds up to a whole lot of nothing on Trump's side that he's just not putting forward. And that, to bring back to the debates, do the debates show that to people who really didn't know that before? I don't know. But I think debates can, crystallize and offer an epitome of that, and then cement it in a way that makes it very difficult to fight as a narrative, especially since, as with Trump, he's not even trying to fight that narrative anymore.
Yeah. And the next thing about Trump debates is that they are offering so many narratives. I mean, if you look at past debates, like with Mitt Romney or Mccain or Palin or whoever, you usually get one big story out of them. That one gaffe in the 90 minutes that you can then wring as much as you can to get some coverage, and then 3 or 4 days later it's basically blown over because there's not that much to report in most cases. But with Trump, not only does he fan the flames, which is bad enough, he also provides so much stuff within one debate that the media can concentrate on one story at a time until it's really done thoroughly, and then has still 3 or 4 stories left to choose from. For example, much of the American debate coverage right now is focused on this whole women stuff. For women he brought to the debate, his creeping up on Hillary, locker room talk, and all that kind of bullshit. While at the same time, if you look at foreign newspapers, like British newspapers or German ones or French ones or Mexican ones or whatever, they are mostly concentrating on if I were president, you would be in jail thing, which is really horrible, by the way. Mm-hmm. So once this whole misogyny thing has finally died, there is still this "I want to be your Mussolini people" thing that is left to explore. And then you can go back to all his previous comments. You can once again tie it to Putin and Assad, which he again praised in the debate, and so on and so forth. There is simply no, you can drag these stories out until the third debate, and then you can drag them to election day. And this is what is really killing Trump right now, because he really needs to change the conversation, and he fails to do so for the last 2 weeks. And it doesn't seem like this will let up in the future, because he provides one story after the other. And Clinton, she had this revelation about these transcripts and hacked mails and everything, and usually this should have been a pretty hard blow, everything from the primaries has been confirmed. All Sanders' critique has been confirmed. They should have a field day, and it barely registered, because Trump is offering so much opportunities to talk about. There is simply no space for a Clinton scandal anymore, even if there was one.
I think that's probably true. Trump is just offers a never-ending abyss for people to plunge into. But I was sort of thinking about like a connection between those two issues you were bringing up. There's his misogyny and the sexual assault he's describing, versus the more, the legal norms being broken. If I was president, you'd be in jail. Threatening your political opponents with jail is, generally something we aren't supposed to be doing in advanced democracies. But the connection there again is dominance. When he admires Putin, it's not just for policy, it's for being manly. It's for running around on horseback with no shirt. That he's strong and controls his people and all that. That's for Trump. I think it's the same basic concept. It's this idea that if I want something, I should grab it. And that's how you prove that you're tough, and that's how you prove that you're masculine, and that's what leadership is. For him to back off, that is, his temperament is not backing off that, but his political appeal is not backing off that. And that all ties into the whole, not being politically correct thing, which is at the core of his candidacy, and it's so much of the modern conservative movement right now, is the idea that they're being muzzled by the language police, and they need to defy that. And I think that's what really connects his personal repulsiveness to the kind of more larger picture of what he would do with his powers as president. I think for him it's really all dominance. And I think that comes through strongly when you compare him to someone like Hillary, who, wrote It Takes a Village, and is, like you said, was a good team player with Tim Kaine, and is just a very good collaborator. And understands, I think, that is a core of being a good president, which is something I think Obama has too. And that's just seems utterly foreign to Trump. He's just bad at working with people. He really needs to be in charge, or he can't function. And that's not good for a president. It's just a terrible, terrible mindset and approach, and that definitely came through strongly in both debates.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a German Twitter friend was feeling like, why is no one talking about the really important issue here, which is this whole jail thing? And I just answered, just wait. Because this has been a pattern that we could see now over the past Trump scandals and debates. His piling on has stopped working. It did work during the primaries and during much of the summer, nobody really knew what to do with it. And now they're just taking it one at a time. And I guess this will come up in the next few days. I might be wrong, of course.
We'll see.
If this plays out like after the first debate or after the vice presidential debate, then they will get around to it and discuss it. And then Trump will comment on it at 3 a.m. in the morning and go like, no, I wouldn't send you to jail. I would send you to Gitmo.
Absolutely.
Retweet. And then it would go on. I can totally see this happening until the third debate starts, and that will be the one about foreign policy. Oh my God. Wow.
Indeed. Wow, indeed.
I guess I don't know any much more to say about this.
Yeah, I think we pretty much exhausted the topic on it. I'm glad it looks like he's losing, but the stuff he's put into the bloodstream is going to last for a long time. And again, the debate doesn't demonstrate that more than any number of other events during the campaign, but it certainly crystallizes it. That, I think that the Republican Party is definitely going to have to reckon with that guy on the stage being their nominee, and that's not going to go away. And I think they're just hoping they can just start debating like Mike Pence again. That's their goal, is to just be able to do that and not have to deal with Trump. And I guess I wish them luck, but not really.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that does it for me. Anything else on the debates we've forgotten? Last tidbits?
No.
Well, all right. Excellent. So we're gonna have one more I think we said one more podcast before the election in a couple weeks. And then we will do, obviously, a post-election show. And then we've been talking about the shows getting into that, getting away from electoral politics and more into policy details and directly comparing them between our respective countries. So that'll be great.
A little change of pace.
You have been listening to The Atlantic Bridge, a podcast about politics viewed from both sides of the pond, with Emmett Booth and Stefan Sasse. New episodes out every fortnight on Friday. You can find us on Tumblr and YouTube and on our own personal sites at poorquentin.tumblr.com and deliberationdaily.de. Thanks for listening.